I've shown you all many different budget PCs on this channel, along with many ways you can budget parts depending on what you are willing to pay or compromise on to get a working PC for gaming, daily use, or maybe even some workstation applications. But you typically have to spend at least a couple or a few $100 to get something worthwhile as a whole unit. A cheap pre-built might be the answer. And yeah, maybe it really is. However, what if all you had was $100 now and were willing to upgrade small things here and there like RAM, your CPU, GPU, storage, or even your power supply when you get some cash down the line? What if there was technically a pre-built you could buy right now that is mostly pre-built and could be a small but worthwhile investment today and a stepping stone to some higher-end gaming later? Well, there isn't an if in this case. It is Man, what a terrible intro. Alright, so I ran into this Dell Optiplex on eBay recently and said to myself, not a bad price, and grabbed one quickly. And I was smart to do so because an hour later it sold out. It listed that it had an i5-4570, which was a pretty okay 4-core for the time, clocked at 3.2 GHz, and that it only has 4 GB of RAM, DVD drive, and no hard drive. Not a big deal, honestly, but this makes for an interesting challenge. All we need now is a cheap SSD, GPU, and extra RAM to turn this non-functioning office computer into a budget gaming PC. But first, before we get into all of it, I want to explain why I went with this particular PC, where I found it, and how you can get them too, because honestly, maybe you should consider this build yourself for a number of good reasons. So, why the Dell Optiplex? If you aren't a tech dweeb, no, not that one, then you might already know this is like the Toyota or Honda of pre-built desktop PCs. There are probably tens of millions of them at this point. I believe this is mostly in part because of major corporations, or even some smaller but sizable companies, needing them for call centers, regular office use, or just other random use cases that Dell likely sold it for a reduced price because they were largely bought in bulk. And eventually down the line, these companies needed to liquidate their inventory to usually upgrade and get rid of these simple but decent units that were used to run the most basic software out there. Which means typically they are in relatively great condition, and besides maybe needing new thermal paste and a new drive, they are awesome budget computers that sometimes have some not too bad specs in them, just like this one, which I got off eBay. But like I said, there are so many of these guys. You could find them virtually anywhere really, like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, or even your local flea market if you are feeling nifty. Prices do vary, but they can be usually found with some basic parts in them for about $50 to $100 depending on when they were made. I got lucky with this one, but you could likely get one for nearly $20 if you are thrifty and patient enough. And last thing, other pre-builds can be like this too. Depending on where you live or where you're from, these could be HPs or Lenovo's depending on your case and scenario. Just double check the parts, do a little research, and see if the price is good enough for a deal at the end of the day. Anyways, enough with the tutorials. Let's get into and double check the system before we start putting this guy together. Hey, what's this doing here? Oh, whatever. Probably nothing important or valuable. Wait, what is this doing here? Is that just straight up a hard drive? I thought the listing said no hard drive. Well, that is interesting. Why is it in here? Maybe someone forgot to take it out. Actually, maybe just because it's in an awkward place, so it's kind of stuck. Wait, why is it up here? Well, at least I know why I heard a bunch of loud noises when I picked this up in the box and moved it around or whatever. Now I wonder if everything even works, or this drive even works for that matter, or if it was even wiped properly. Let's go ahead and test the whole unit real quick and throw in the $10 GPU for now so we can have some basic display out. A few power cycles later, and okay. Well, looks like this isn't a Windows 7 machine, I guess? Windows XP, huh? Interesting. Well, this boot loop isn't helping, and I can't read the B-SOD, so since Windows XP is kind of useless, let's try and remove this drive and see what we can figure out a little bit about it before we move forward. For starters, this definitely couldn't have been the drive this computer came with. Maybe. But we know that this drive is very basic. It's a Hitachi DeskStar with a whole 160 gigs of storage. Man, we have advanced quite a lot since 2009. But this is a chance for us to reuse the drive if it is in good condition, as we need to use every part as best as we can. I went ahead and put this drive into a computer to check what was on it, and found out that this was actually a government PC at one point, which means the seller I got it from likely bought these in bulk at a government auction and then resold them after he wiped them clean and took out the drives. Well, almost all of them. But I get why he didn't do it with this one. However, all he had to do was take out the RAM stick to make space to pull it out. So actually, no, they suck big time for not doing the bare minimum. Anyways, besides looking at all the pictures on it, which made no sense or had no correlation, what? I did the responsible thing, wiped it clean, realized after I should just format it anyways, and put it to the side so that later we could put it into the PC after we install Windows. Speaking of which, with our limited budget, what parts/upgrades will we make with our $100 budget? Technically, more like 50 now, but well, before we dig into that, let's do some basic maintenance since while this PC was cleaned pretty nicely, I'm betting the CPU and heatsink could use some fresh thermal paste. And yeah, I think it could use it. After being soaked in a little alcohol and confirming that we got it right, that our CPU is the i5-4570 that we ordered, we could reapply some fresh thermal paste and reattach our cooler back into our CPU and its motherboard. Welcome back home, champion. Now, obviously we need more RAM, which I was able to pick up these two 4GB sticks of VisionTek, which together equals 8 gigs. They aren't very fast. I mean, we are running DDR3 to begin with, 133 megahertz, but it is fine now, especially for a price of $5.78. We will use the other 4GB stick that our system came with, which definitely means we won't be running in dual channel, but 12 gigs of RAM is way better than 8 and is a lesser evil to have in terms of bottlenecks compared to not having memory run at a certain speed or whatever. You get what I mean. So then, what about storage? I don't want our boot drive to be the 160 gig Toshiba desk paperweight, since, well, I don't feel like gaming on a PC like it's 2009 again, so an SSD will be the way to go. I got this T-Force Vulcan Z240GB SSD for $19.25. It is perfect for making the system run a lot faster with an okay amount of storage without breaking our $100 budget. And even if that wasn't enough for our system, once we get Windows installed, we can put in that hard drive for any low-end indie or classic video game that we might play from time to time. This will alleviate the problem of our main drive filling up immediately and having to delete a ton of games just so you can try and run a large one. Which brings us to our final part, and probably most important part. Our budget is looking pretty used up at this point, and our options are sort of bleak. It wouldn't be a big deal for me or you to go over budget a couple of bucks here in order for us to get something good for our system, but without having to tell you guys this, clearly there isn't much to pick or choose from on essentially 20 whole smackers. Now, if we wanted to comfortably stay under our budget, we could just keep the $10 GPU in, call it a day, and have a PC that will allow us to play plenty of games for the next year or so before we have to make a serious upgrade in order to play some newer titles. Actually, you know what? The $10 GPU isn't that bad of an option, actually. It's small, has a low power consumption, only draws all that power from the PCI port, so no 6-pin adapter is needed or whatever, and is, well, $10. If you've seen my last video on it, you would know what it could do, and for this PC, it makes pretty good sense for us to choose this fella. It kinda is the sensible choice, but I want something a little bit better. So I scoured the internet, saw stuff and things, but ultimately was unsatisfied at the end of the day, and as a last-ditch effort, I checked my tech hoard for ideas, and was reminded of a GPU that might be the perfect card for this situation, the FirePro W5100. Not only is this an upgrade from our $10 GPU, it has double the ports, double the VRAM, and looks pretty slick, all while not requiring an extra power connector or what have you in order to run effectively in our $100 system. And for the keen budget bin fan who watched the original video where I reviewed this card, you might be saying right now, wait a second, Mr. Bin, you paid like 25 bucks for this card. You went over budget here. I am unsubscribing. To which I respect the decision to do so. We are a little over budget, but I'm going to have to activate my spell card, Enemy Controller here, and have you resub. And also cheat a little bit with the pricing. The lowest price I wish I had gotten it for would have technically been in budget, as I mentioned in its original review back in the day. After all, the idea is that we are building a $100 PC by piecemealing and haggling with others to get something that works just enough.
And, well, it isn't like I'm throwing in a low-profile RTX 3050 in here and saying,
oh, yeah, I haggled him and fooled him. So this shouldn't be that big of a deal, honestly. Yeah, I hope you guys are on my side on this one. So let's swap out our $10 GPU and put in the best worst GPU in to see what our performance is going to be like overall. But first, a message from our sponsor. Today's sponsor is, after putting the FirePro W5100 in, we installed Windows 10 So like any super duper hyper budgeted build, there's always a catch. Because why not? And that catch is usually a bit of troubleshooting. The PC is blinking 3 times orange, which if I remember correctly is like a memory error of some sort. But it also could be related to the drive I decided to throw back in immediately instead of being patient and doing that after I finished installing Windows. So that is getting unplugged. And we are going to mess around with our RAM a little. Hopefully this isn't the VisionTek RAM not being compatible with the PC, since sometimes OEM systems only want you to buy parts directly from them, but it is probably just a resetting issue. We will take out the original RAM stick just to confirm this, and yeah, looks like it just needed to be reseated. So let's just put back in the other RAM stick, get through the BIOS messages, and boom, Windows. Cool. Well, we can install and not pay for our CD key because we are broke, and deal with the hard drive after a restart. Thankfully, our troubleshooting wasn't too bad, and only really took 10 minutes to fix too. All that is left in the entire process is to use our PC and game a little. So, what is it like using this PC then? Well, for $100, it feels pretty snappy. I'm using a $1 Wi-Fi USB to install programs and games, but if I had an extra Ethernet cable lying around here, I bet it would feel pretty fast. Launching software or even starting up the computer itself doesn't feel like I'm waiting for eternity for something to finish or occur. SSDs really do just make a difference in performance and usability for these older PCs. Now, as for gaming, indie games seem to run very well on it, which is no big surprise to me at least. Almost all of them are playable to some degree, and I wanted to use MSI Afterburner to look at our bottlenecks while going through a bunch of these games to have our CPU utilization, memory, and FPS on screen to give you an idea of where our weakest links are, but for some reason the program isn't cooperating like it normally does. Regardless, it goes without saying we are pushing this hardware to its limits, but that you can play almost any indie game on it with decent settings, as well as a fair amount of AAA titles. Just so as long as you have the latest drivers to play those latest AAA games. The only real struggle is getting drivers, since for this card I used Driver Easy when I checked it out in its video 10 months ago, but Driver Easy kinda sucks now, and RID, or NIMS, doesn't know what this card is, so I might put a link in the description for those drivers from the original video, since they seem like the only way to make this GPU really usable. Oh, by the way, you will have to install the drivers manually. But, yeah, gaming. Will you have to lower all settings to play at 720p with some of those spicy AAA titles you have been fancying? For a good amount of them, yeah, probably. But for $100, does it really matter that you aren't getting over 100 FPS in a high-end title at 1080p if you build a PC like this? Don't get me wrong, it isn't perfect, and small upgrades in the future like an extra 4GB stick of RAM or cheap 2TB hard drive is going to go a long way in allowing you to play games more comfortably on this thing. But unlike many hyper-budget gaming pieces I have seen, usually they wrap it up with, hey look, you can play Skyrim and esports on it. Which is fine, but nowadays we can do a lot better. Also, I'm not reinstalling COD or Apex. Look, they ran all right in my review on the GP almost a year ago, so it's fine. But, yeah, like I said, the market has changed a lot. And you can get a pretty okay system, so as long as you are patient and play your cards right. And with 20 or 50 more bucks, we can make a system that runs even better than this if we really wanted to. Only if we had that type of scratch available. But for a just game now PC, I think this is more than enough for someone who might even be on the fence with PC gaming, and if they turn out to be into it, later they can spend a whole lot more on a system that will last year after year after year. And if they really aren't into it, no harm, no foul. For 100 bucks, you could waste your money in worse ways. And so as long as you had some fun one way or the other, there would hopefully be something worth taking away from the experience in the end. What an awesome budget build this was. Despite all the small problems and troubleshooting I had to do in order to make this guy work correctly, I feel like it is pretty alright for someone who has a tight budget, can't break the bank, but wants to game with the boys at the end of the day, as the hip kids say. But yeah, I hope you guys agree. Tell me what you think, or tell me if you think I could have done a better job in the comments below. Maybe there was a special trick I could have pulled out of a hat somewhere to make this even more powerful. Also, become a member if you want to support more content like this. It's only 99 cents a month, and I would greatly appreciate if you did. But you can always subscribe for free if you want to see more stuff like this anyways. Join the Discord, like the video if you did, yada yada yada, and oh, as always, thanks for watching.